Hello, and welcome to Husky Talk, Broker Than You. I am your host, the best podcast host in the universe, Steve Cully. I would like to thank our sponsors at Procyon Partners. Procyon Partners, they specialize in employee benefits, wealth management, and retirement planning. President Sean Rabinowitz is a proud supporter of Husky Talk, and they are one of the top 50 fastest growing companies in the nation. I would also like to mention returning Green Street Trust International. Green Street Trust International is owned and operated by former teammate and friend Rennell Jump down in Florida. They offer a variety of services, but they specialize in taxes and tax planning. They will meet with you and strategically put together a tax plan. They work with businesses, large, small, people, doesn't matter, and they will save you a bundle. They recently saved a friend of mine $25,000. They recently got a friend of mine a return of $5,000 when he was going to be expected to pay. So Rennell and his team do a fantastic job. For more information, go to their website, greenstreettrust.com, and you can set up a free strategy consultation, and Rennell will work with you. And the rest of our sponsors I will mention later. So now to the guest of the hour, the man himself. I did a Husky Talk with him last week, and he has a real estate business of his own. He is launching a couple new things coming up in the new year, and just with an amazing story of where he's been, where he's going, and he advocates for foster children all over the state, and he adopts them himself. Just an amazing person, Mr. Sam Dorville, former UConn football player.
Appreciate. Yeah, for sure. Go Blue.
And by the way, my co-host Laban Marsh. No, hey. Laban is the charismatic enigma, as I like to call him. Laban is the real estate king of Erie, Pennsylvania. Marsh & Marsh Real Estate. Laban runs about 24 different companies with his brothers, and he answers questions that we get from people throughout the state of places I've never even heard of. And Laban has done such a fantastic job. The name Broker Than You, which I thought was absolutely absurd, turned out to fit perfectly.
Right.
So I have to give Laban all the credit. He's built up quite a following in Erie County and beyond in Pennsylvania. So Laban,
well, I appreciate it, Steve. Great to see you. It's great to be with you at the UConn win over UNC at Fenway. Nice. What a big part of for the program. And I have to give a shout out. Notre Dame plays today, but Notre Dame football. I was adopted into fanhood recently when our high school had a chain gang. A number of guys, these old timers that used to play that still give back to the community. And so they run the chains at all the high school games. So they've seen so many guys come through, James Conner, all these different local Erie guys. And so they adopted me into their fandom. And that's how I got out to that UConn women's game with those guys. So they're having a big party today in Erie to watch the Notre Dame game.
Going to be a big one.
It should be a very big game. So I wanted to give a shout out. But the other thing is shout out to Augie's Locker Room in South Bend, Indiana. So this T-shirt, remember
are they a sponsor, Laban?
Don't worry about it, brother. But this is in real estate. You sometimes have to give a little to get a little bit.
Okay.
And so, but what's cool about Augie's Locker Room is this T-shirt has on it. It says white 40. And so I looked it up, and there was a linebacker in 2021 who graduated named Drew White, wore the number 40. So Augie's Locker Room gets these shirts from like former players, former athletes, and they resell them. I'm not buying anything at Notre Dame's bookstore, but if you're telling me I can get the T-shirt of somebody who actually wore that, and the back of it says built different, you better believe it.
That fits you for sure.
That's a cool story.
It is a pretty cool story, and that's the only reason I also do have, just not to get too close to the heart, I have my Connecticut Athletics issued shirt underneath.
Aeropostale.
I have to thank you, Laban, for putting me to bed Friday night. By the way,
happy to do that. But listen,
putting me to bed.
I know Sam is younger than us. When he said Aeropostale, brother, this is Russell.
Oh my goodness!
I'm so old.
When he was there, when he was there, we were the only goddamn team in the country that was sponsored by Aeropostale.
Yeah,
and Aeropostale gear.
That was the Big East, because my wife, who played field hockey, has a really nice Big East championship coat, and it is made by Aeropostale. So it was the Big East.
I was humiliated when we played Miami, and I'm down there with an Aeropostale jersey.
Well, and that's where Notre Dame's Under Armour. And I like that UConn is Nike. And to elaborate a little bit, Sam, the name Broker Than You, in real estate, because it's Robert Kiyosaki that always said, be careful about real estate brokers, mortgage brokers, financial brokers, because a lot of times they're broker than you. And now I know that's not the case for you, and thankfully myself. But the other thing, as a former player, Steve and I have both had head trauma. Hopefully you have not. But when there's times where you get pretty depressed and down, you always have to remember that there are people out there broker than you. And so from my perspective, it was something where it played double edge, where I'm a real estate broker, but I'm also, a CTE sufferer, if you will. And so and that's why I love being with Steve on the weekly, because he keeps uplifting people like you. And well, you got to be, because there's things that we deal with as former football players and rugby and soccer that other athletes don't have to deal with when they were in non-contact. And can I bring up real quick the absolute terrible no call on the targeting yesterday was clearly targeting, and they clearly won Texas in that championship game?
The targeting thing has turned into a complete mess, because it's completely subjective. And whoever is reviewing it gets it
let
wrong.
Them play then let them play. The old Steve Atwater, and bring it back and let's play football.
I'm at the point now where
I didn't really think it was targeting.
Really?
And here's why. This is what I said to my wife. All right. So when I saw the hit, right, I told my wife, I was like, at fullback, that's exactly how I would hit somebody.
You're right.
Right?
You're right.
Right in the face. I want to hit him. It was close. It was close, right? If his head would have went down just a little bit more,
it did.
But it was head-to-head contact.
And that's the other thing. Somebody said face mask. Big fun. Campoli chimes in and says, I don't know if it was Luke Richmond he talked to, but he says, I talked to a Stripes buddy of mine, and he said it was face mask is face mask. I'm like, well, face mask is part of the helmet, and if we're protecting guys, that stunned him. You know what I mean? If he would have taken out his legs, he might have been able to catch the ball. That was way too. And then to go to the review and come out and say, nope, didn't see it. It's like,
that's happened so many times. Laban, when we were at the Syracuse game, the Skylar Bell one, I was blown away by.
Yeah, that was right.
I thought the player was going to go from getting ejected. He goes from getting ejected to the flag being picked up, and not. There's no targeting at all.
No, you're right. So I don't want to dwell on those factors. But so I want to dig into Sam and learn more about what he's doing, because in real estate we do our due diligence, and you're a developer, correct?
Sam has done a million different things, and I'm so happy that he really found his passion in real estate recently.
And Yeah, and so I did my due diligence on Sam, and he just this morning posted an article about, really due diligence. And when I looked at the article, I'm like, oh, it's authored by him too. This is great. You know what I mean? Because my wife writes articles for different magazines and things.
Sam has a very high IQ, Leighton.
Well,
his IQ's higher than yours and mine combined.
I believe it.
I just read a lot, which is
he does
because I was in dropout prevention for most of my schooling from like the 3rd grade to the 8th grade. So I was with the quote unquote bad kids. And then I didn't complete my first book until freshman year of college. And then something happened in 2020. I had a lot of time on my hand, but I picked up a book, and then after I completed it, I felt like I grew.
He became a sponge.
And then after that, I just started just consuming more and more books. I'm just always just looking for one additional nugget, no matter what subject topic is, and when I find something that I love, I definitely drill miles deep into it.
Well, yeah, he really became a sponge.
What was great about even the article, though, because I serve on a local sewer authority, and then I've got land across the street that, as far as the due diligence goes, there's wetlands that was discovered after the fact, and I sold 2 lots, but so many people don't come into the sewer authority to ask, hey, can I tie in, to public utilities? What are the costs? They don't do their due diligence. And your article made a great point to reach out. And I thought even more over the top as far as, because if there's boundary issues, hire a surveyor. But so much, especially on the commercial development, gets into the environmentalist and things like that. You brought up soil conditions that people don't often think about. And so, again, I think what's great is delving into the educational side of things makes such a big difference. And also to take your time. The other thing I liked, not to be not afraid to walk away from a deal. And I think so many times, whether depending on how you come into the opportunity for the deal, you feel like, oh, I got to bring it over the finish line. And it's like, no, sometimes being able to walk away is a bigger win. And you don't have a crystal ball, but to your point in the article was, I think it was on LinkedIn, but it was just so fabulous with the way you laid it out and explained the due diligence process. Because for myself and the land development it gets expensive, especially if it doesn't get through the finish line. Because I'm about 30 into surveying and permitting and everything, and then the deal doesn't go through. And so that's part of that. Not speculation, but in the investment side of it, and I had already made my money on the lot. But if you don't do your due diligence and you make an investment on something that just can't come to fruition because a lot of the things that you pointed out, how difficult is that in your area? Whether it's the permitting, I know stormwater management has become a major issue. What do you find is the biggest hurdle right now in development?
We're next to a swamp and wetlands, right? So so there's significant amount of challenges with these soil conditions when it comes to land like that. So I'll tell you, there was one project that I was looking at. It was in Southwest Ranches, and this, first off, they bought it from a church. They had cows on it for a very, very long time. And for some reason, this particular property just wasn't moving. And I remember when the city finally did the rezoning, they did rezone the property for big 2.5 acre lots. I don't know what lot sizes are in Erie, but 2.5 acre lots is a really big lot, especially in South Florida, where the density is very high. So, but there was a developer that was selling the lot. So it just made you ask questions as to why is he looking to sell the lot. One, he didn't get the conditions that he wanted. He wanted to be able to probably subdivide it into 1 acre, 1 acre slivers. So then, they could put more properties on the lot. But then the other one, which was a alarm bell to me, in the due diligence period, he had a very tight timeline. Which, if
that's a red
the timeline
flag.
is it's a red flag. That means they found something that you probably won't discover in enough time to get through the due diligence period to be able to purchase lot. So there's things like that happens. And when you mentioned, just walking away from the deal, it was like, this don't smell right, and it doesn't smell right for a reason. So,
well. And I think that's great to follow your intuition too, because when you've, to your point of the early education, when you've done enough education and then you go out in the real world and experience, and then to have the discipline, and I think this comes from being a former athlete too, to be able to say, no, it just smells funny intuitively. It just doesn't feel right, because we all know that winning feeling when you walk into a locker room and that aura is just, I was meant to be here, right? So exactly. I think that's true in real estate deals for sure. But I love that you pointed out the zoning issue, because when you say it was a church, so, and I don't know if this is just state law or a federal thing, but churches do not require zoning. You can build a church anywhere. Because what I have found, a lot of transitions from church, like there's a property in our area where my son goes and plays basketball. I'm like, there's wetlands all around this. How did they get away with this? And then my brother's like, oh, it was a former church. And it's like, oh, there it is. And then the church builds its structure beyond rules that most people can't abide by. And then they go to resell it. And now it's got some of those kind of questionable things where if they want to do an addition, will they have the ability? Because now they're different than a church, and they're going to be looked at in a different way, developmentally speaking. So it's interesting that, again, zoning is so important, because that guy wanted to break down lots. Well, there's a town in McCain Township. There is one subdivision with 1 acre lots, and they said no more subdividing under 2 acres. So if you had a 4 acre lot, you could subdivide 2 acres. But if you had 3.5, you cannot, they will not let you subdivide below 2 acres, because they want to retain that rural feel. And so, and I'm saying there's 28 different municipalities in Erie County, and that's the only one that I think has restrictions on subdivisions of certain acreage. So great point on the zoning. And it's interesting because my youngest brother's a pastor, and they've got a pretty traditional church right in town. But I know some other local churches that have really grown, and the areas they can build in, it's kind of like they can just take a dart and throw it on the map and pick where they want to build. So very interesting point. And again, be willing to walk away, I think, is such a great point for people who, especially if you want to get started, like, oh, I want to get my first deal. It's like, dude, take your time. And I tell buyers when I show them homes, we'll make offers, they don't get it, they're really bummed out. And I'm like, listen, I will sit at the closing table with you, and you will be so thrilled that this is the home you're buying and not the ones that you lost out on. So that intuition and just trying to, figure out the right path. And that's outstanding, Sam.
Yeah, so an amazing deal comes by every 24 hours. You just have to be patient, and you gotta wait. And sometimes, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, not only do you have to wait, but you have to know what you want. Because, and I've told investors this, like, if you tell me you're looking for a 4-unit that cash flows, okay. But if you say, well, I want 5 to 10 units in this area between this price point, the more you focus on what you want, there are a million deals a day. And as long as you know what you're looking for, you can find it. But if you just say, well, I want a good investment property that returns, it's so vague that it is hard, to see the tree through the forest.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, Sam had his own contracting business too. That was a big issue, because he said when he had started out, he had issues with contractors left and right. So starting his own business was huge.
So now, are you a laborer at all, or you just oversee everything?
No, I oversee everything, but I'll kind of just take you through a little bit of a timeline. But what happened was I was a wholesaler first, and then I became a house flipper, and then I was telling him the story on my first deal. I hired a contractor, fired a contractor, hired a second contractor, But and then on the third contractor, I completed the project. And then, from there, I started running my own projects. And then, I got my bearings. And then after 2 years of running, this construction business, I realized I didn't know anything. Right? I mean, the good thing about contracting is there's something new every day. There's a new issue to solve, which kind of fits my box because I'm naturally creative and naturally a problem solver. So, but when I really dove into the systems and really just operating from a systematic standpoint, things really began to change. But the industry is very challenged for a lot of reasons. One, the contractors are not business people. They're not highly educated. They tend to come from the trades, so they don't have the same thought process that I do or the other big design build contractors do. The ones that are ultra successful are diving in and investing in themselves on a regular basis. They're in round tables. They're meeting with others. They're getting all of these nuggets. They're implementing. They're doing the lessons learned. They're auditing themselves, right? And if you're not doing that, you could do that in any business or any industry. You're not going to grow, right? Yeah. So that's the contracting business. But the reality of the contracting business is that there's just too much red tape, right? And with supply issues, which there's things that you could do to kind of get around them with pre-planning and ordering and stuff like that, and the permitting process and the architect delays, and there's just so many steps that for me, I never wanted to be a contractor to begin with. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I let somebody else fight that fight, and we'll manage and develop projects that makes the most sense for us. So we'll use it as an arm instead of the primary thing.
And I think that's a great idea, because even for us, and I was curious to know about, knowing that you're kind of dabbling in a lot of that real estate. And I think Steve mentioned your wife is a licensed agent, right?
She is. Yep.
Yeah. So, because my wife was a loan officer at first. She started out as an accountant, graduated from UConn, played field hockey there. And then she got in the mortgage business because me and my family needed a good loan officer. But then we also started a title company. And so, again, when you look at real estate, there are so many ancillary business opportunities. To your point, the contracting, but also to your point, the permitting fact of contracting. Like the city of Erie has so much more red tape and costs of permit. And so when you go to bid a job as a contractor in the city, it's going to cost more than the suburbs because of the city's permits. And yet the city consumers like, why does it cost so much more? My mother had it done in her, and it's like, well, because the city requires permits that cost so much, they take weeks to establish, and so the work is so much more challenging. And a lot of good contractors won't even work in the city because they just don't want to deal with it. It's not the cost effectiveness, but it's just all that more red tape. And so they start to find the areas and the suburbs where they're not as watchful. And I'm sure that's hard to escape in Florida. And then you have, with development, the insurance. And to your point, whether it's wetlands area, like how close is it to waterways where it could either not get flood insurance? I mean, there's just so many factors. And that's where even what I deal with in Erie, Pennsylvania is far different. Like I'm looking out the window, I got 2 to 3 feet of snow coming, which creates new challenges, you know what I mean? But much like in Florida, I don't know that market like you would. And so it's good to get somebody knowledgeable, not only with the experience, but specifically in that area to be able to do that. Do you reach out and invest outside of Florida? Or are you pretty localized and focused on where you're at?
But I have in Connecticut. I've done a couple projects there, but that wouldn't be something that I normally do. If there's obviously we will look at opportunities, outside of the state, just because it's just a lot cheaper. everywhere else except South Florida in California. That's essentially. Yeah. So no, I haven't done outside of South Florida.
Well, and I think that's good again to know what you know, and what you don't know can really get you in these projects, and that's where it goes back to like that due diligence with the other guy when it just seems like he's trying to get rid of it quick. What's going on? Short timeline, all those type of red flags. So that's outstanding, though.
Yeah. So where this is transitioned for me is. So when I found education, it was design build, right? So before I was, hey, you purchase your material, I'll do the work, or hey, there's certain aspects of this that we could check off, or the client will pick and choose. That's the absolute nightmare, right? So it really is. And then once we started drilling down on, design build and handling every aspect of the project, from the planning to handling the selections with the designer to doing all of the floor plans with the architect and just being that single point of contact, it became very clear that that's where, the value is. And it's a higher end
product.
Product and clientele.
100%.
So,
that's great.
For me, this segue into coaching investors how to get into
consulting,
building specs and new development is right in my wheelhouse, because I was holding the hands of a stressful client quite often. Very emotional, but you have to babysit, you have to patty cake it, and you have to be decent with people. So for the investor, it's going to be a lot easier for me to do that, right? They're comfortable doing certain types of transactions already, and understanding that you have to manage your risk tolerance. So I would say right now there is significant headwinds in the building space. I don't know if you've seen the reports on what the national builders are kind of projecting. Laban, have you seen it or no?
I have not seen it, but I know we are so far behind in new construction. I mean, throughout not only throughout the country.
Yeah. You said you were low on inventory, right?
Inventory has been low, but even the inventory we have is all churn. It's not new construction. And so the other thing I was curious about, Sam, do you have in South Florida and everything? It's different than my market. Like the people who are building in my market are building to live there. I know in those markets, Airbnb has been big. Are you building for investors that immediately turn it into rentals? Do you have, like, going back to zoning, we have had a lot of areas that are passing. You can't have Airbnb, which is a whole nother topic that I'd love to get into as far as real estate and property rights. But because of zoning, they don't allow rentals in certain areas. Or like I know there's
Airbnb is considered a rental.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah, because and then you got to be careful, because like a hotel motel, then you get into a different type of licensing and things. So, but yeah, Airbnb is definitely a rental.
But if you own your home, and you want to Airbnb it, how can it be considered a rental?
Because it is a short.
I own my own home and I can't Airbnb it.
I'm set in the city of Erie and in different areas that I sell in. If you buy a home, that home may not be able to be used as Airbnb. It's as crazy as it sounds, but it comes back to zoning rules, because like they've had big parties that lead to fights and different stuff. And so but it's not like what if you're renting it to a single family? It's not like it's Yeah, and I didn't mean to get down a rabbit hole with that, but I was just curious with your builds and things. Is it mostly people looking to build and live there, or is it, hey, you're developing for investors knowing that the need for rentals is larger, or no?
It was mainly build to live there. All right? Okay. Yeah, exactly. So I'm putting on my investor hat. It would be, building to resell. All right. So We just don't have the current bandwidth to build and hold, which is probably the best strategy.
100%.
Just because you get that equity on that equity that you build, and,
right?
So in the future,
Laban,
that will be.
What does that mean, Laban?
So, like I have a local friend who the wife is actually the laborer and the builder, and they started building single families. They've now expanded into duplexes, 4 units, but they build them from scratch and then they hold and rent everything out. So even the single family homes they build, a lot of times they'll hold it either a couple years, let it mature a little bit, because when I sell resale homes versus new construction, I mean, it's similar to cars where it's like if you get a used car, but it has 2,500 miles on it, it's been really well cared for, then you're going to pay a little bit more than 10 years old and trashed. Similar home, when you build a new construction home and then you rent it for 3 to 5 years and now you go to sell it, to a lot of people, it still feels like a newer home being 5 years old. And so, and I've always been a buy and hold kind of guy, but when you can build and hold, to Sam's point, you really, because then most builds, when you look a year later, they appreciate in value because materials have gone up over the last year. The cost of labor has gone up. And so it's strategic for a lot of investors to get in on that ground floor to buy properties that, especially if they can be rented right out of the gate, because most tenants would much rather rent a new construction home than something that's been lived in by others. So very interesting point. And thank you, Steve, for interjecting with that question, because it is a very good question.
It is a great perspective.
And it's not built for anyone specifically. It's built because someone invested in it. And then eventually it's sold. It's not like someone wanted it built. You decided to build it in the hopes of selling it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many strategies to it. And again, I think that's where, depending on, is that my dog, Steve, or your dog?
Not my dog. I'm in the basement.
Sam, you got a dog?
No, that's not me. That's not me.
That must be my dog.
Just hit a click. And then you're good.
No. Oh, man. Okay. Sorry.
So here's, because we're talking about a bunch of different aspects of real estate. And the one that is glaring to me, I know our markets are different, is structuring deals through creative finance, right? So, West Palm Beach recently has the highest reported list pendants for in the country.
In the country? West Palm Beach
in the country. Right. So there's a lot of people that are not going to be able to sell and get their terms. There's a bunch of headwinds going on, right? There's a insurance crisis, right? There's interest rates that are super high, so you're not able to, maximize your loan, right? Loan qualifications have tightened.
Yep.
So there's all of these headwinds, right? And everything has just gotten very, very expensive in South Florida. So we're seeing that there's going to be a massive opportunity to structure deals through creative finance. And then some of them that are coming up that have the most issues were properties that were purchased 2002 and beyond. I think 2002 and beyond, right? That's when the interest rate really kind of started spiking, right? So if they're structured with a interest rate that is 3 to 4%, that's a great loan. So with that particular loan, if we get the right terms, then we could structure something to package that up and hold it for a while. So do you want me to dive into what that looks like?
Well, and I think that's where you get into like assumable loans and the types of loans and on those transfers. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Not a regular mortgage we're talking about.
Well, it's not a regular mortgage, right? Because a regular mortgage is a 7% percent mortgage.
Okay.
Right. So if someone has a 3.5%, 4% mortgage, the way that it gets packaged. All right. So as a broker realtor, right?
I'm sorry, I'm dumb. I don't know this stuff.
They typically avoid these type of transactions.
I'm sitting here like, cover the ears. This is not well, and that's where, because as a real estate broker, and you had mentioned early on, Sam, that you had started in wholesaling. Well, yes. Pennsylvania just passed a law. As of January 1st, 2025, wholesalers need to be licensed. And I'm like, well, then that changes their whole game, because they have to have fiduciary responsibility to their client. Correct. And it's really hard to wholesale when you're telling them, now you lay all these options out and say, hey, I can get you a good deal right now, and then you give me time and I'll shop it. But most of the time in wholesaling, the consumer doesn't necessarily know what's going on. And I think that's where, when you get into licensure and real estate, we have, it's full disclosure. It's an open book, transparent. And there are ways, and that was where I was going into. Some of these loans are assumable. And so but a lot of times the bank, if they've got 3.25 and there's a new buyer coming in and the rate's 7.5, you can imagine the bank wants the 7.5, not the 3.5. And so, that's where Sam, and there are different creative ways of financing to make that, whether you call it creative way of financing, or carrying the note for somebody. It gets into ways where, again, as a PA licensed real estate broker, I got earmuffs because I'm not, I don't know all the details of how they operate.
Yes. So I'll explain a little bit more in depth. So the way that a creative deal is structured is it would go into a land trust, right? And the land trust,
that's good.
Yeah, that's good. And the land trust is different because it allows you to be able to change the beneficiary of the land trust just by just writing it down, and the beneficiary will change. So you could change the ownership of that particular property and, in a way, not technically, assume the mortgage. But so that's kind of how it's structured. So we could, get that particular property.
Is it like putting it in an escrow fund?
It is in the escrow, because some of the terms, if you don't make payment, it goes back to the owner. Yeah, so it's in the escrow. It has a fiduciary. Yeah.
And so, but Steve, what happens is, like in our MLS, we had I think an investor from New Jersey who was using a PA licensed broker, and they wanted to list their option in the MLS. And so what that means is, right, they have that person has a property under contract. Okay. Say they have it under contract for 100,000, but they want to market their option for 150,000. And so now they put on the market that they say, I have this house for sale for 150,000, come buy it. And they write an offer. And once they get it for 150,000, the seller gets their 100,000 and the wholesaler gets the 50,000 difference between the buyer who bought it at 150 and the seller who got the 100,000. Right. So that's the connection. Right. And that's where it's more incentivizing. And a lot of wholesalers are like, well, why would I get my real estate license and earn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% when I can just take a lump sum by merging a happy seller and a happy buyer? And in the real estate licensing, they're like, are they really happy? Do they really know all the details? Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the trick of it. And it's not always, Aunt Sally that is always being taken advantage of, but there are, and this is what I love about real estate. And to Sam's point, I have made really good deals because a seller needs the money. And so it's like, hey, I don't have time to put it on the market. If you'll buy it from me, I know I'm giving it away basically, but I need this thing done. So I don't like to pigeonhole, the wholesaling side of things, because again, if everybody in the transaction knows what's going on, you can get really good deals in the market. To Sam's point, they're coming around in droves every day, but you got to know what to look for. And then if it smells funny, make your decision, seek advice. And I know you do a Monday meditation, right? I'm a big Proverbs guy. Proverbs, you know what I mean? From 27:1, do not boast about tomorrow. You know not what the day may bring. But to seek advisors, and I have 3 or 4 people, my parents, of course, my brothers, but I have financial advisors. I have a coach who I go to with any and every deal and just say, hey, let me bounce this off you. Does it make sense? Yeah. Is there anything, that I'm not seeing? Because I'm so excited about this deal and I'm emotional in it. And so I think it's important to seek advisors like yourself, Sam, and people need people like you to help in that process and to know what to expect, because again, you don't know what you don't know. And then when you've been through it and you lay out why it's important to go through that, it may seem foolish or unnecessary, but when you've been through that experience and know how it can bite you, and listen, money is money, but it can ruin relationships. And that's where, for me, and I say to people all the time, I've had too many concussions to tell lies because I wouldn't remember what I told you the first time. So I got to be sure. Yeah, right.
Rather sleep good at night. That's just kind of
But you are right. The way interest rates are right now, and even if they can come down a little bit, it's really hard to get certain sellers off of the 2.75s, the 3.25s, and we are hurting for inventory, whether that's new construction or just the overall resale market. So I do hope and I think prices on material have stabilized a decent amount, because the supply. I mean, my brother was building a home. Windows weren't in. Garage doors weren't available. I mean, that really makes it hard to plan. And then there were some really good contractors who said, hey, I can only honor this bid for 90 days, right? Because they bid it in the fall, and then come spring, the seller's like, or the consumer's like, hey, I want to do that. It's like, dude, everything has gone up 30%. I just can't honor that bid. But if you're just a contractor that says, oh, it's 12 months, it's good, and now you didn't expect all these increases in costs, and that includes fuel. Because one of the best things in contracting that I learned in Connecticut, when you bid a job, my boss would always say, you don't teleport to the job site. Like, explain to the consumer that you meet at the shop and then you drive to the job site, do the job site, you clean up, you drive back to the shop. So you have to include travel time, and you can explain that to the client so that they know, hey, you're being transparent. And the reason the guy next door gave you a price so much lower is that he's not including all these things. And so he's going to come back at you halfway through the job and say, hey, I need more money, because they didn't plan properly.
Correct.
Sam, go ahead. You had a question from last week from Husky Talk. You had a bunch of questions, but one of them had asked, this came from Bob from Tampa, about market knowledge. How familiar are you with your specific area and the current market conditions specifically? How good do you feel about that? Your knowledge of the area.
I'm very, very aware of. I'm constantly consuming information when it comes to, market knowledge. All right, because you have to understand, if there is flip opportunities are going to look different than build opportunities, or buy and hold, right? So, I would say it's definitely not a flippers market, just because of the
the risk
issue, the risk, right? Of holding it, and it's expensive money. So it's going to be challenging, and that's probably why we're looking at just structuring more deals long term with Creative Finance.
Sam, another question you had was, with the new projects that you have going on, as far as a client load, how many active clients would you like to have or currently have as this thing progresses?
So we are looking at 100 clients. Right, that's just kind of the number that we've kind of set out. And it's mainly done through group coaching. It's not individual. If you want to maximize yourself, it really needs to be, one to many. And similar to what you're doing now is we have a Q&A, every week. Bring your questions, submit them early, right? Submit them early, bring your questions, and then we'll knock them out. And then you can get the recordings, after the fact too. So you kind of have that log. So
Laban, you had a question from a while ago that I never got to. It was Jim from that Bell Vernon or
Bell Valley.
Bell Valley, that one.
Yeah.
They wanted to know, it was, I believe her name was Lori. How often will you provide updates, and how will you communicate with me throughout the process as you sell my home?
Oh, and selling the home, especially in this market, because it is very active with low inventory. I mean, I think it's good to set expectations. Not only how often will you communicate, but like, how do you like to be? Do you want me to call you? Do you like email? Do you prefer text message? Like, sometimes people just assume, and especially the younger generation, like, oh, everybody's cool with texting. Well, no, not everybody is cool with that. So you need to find out. And that is a great question. And what I would say to her is, how often would you like me to communicate with you? Because I typically will just give you updates. You get notified, with showings and things like that. But I am in regular communication with all of our clients that are ongoing. So like, I know my brother Lucas has a day where he just calls his clients, every Monday to get whether price improvements, just to discuss. But it is important to find out how they like to communicate and what's easiest. And then it goes back to part of that, like personality types, the DISC profile. I'm somebody that is short and sweet, but I know that not everybody is. And so an S personality might want me to call and talk a little bit about the ball games and whatever else, build that rapport. And so, I think figuring out the best approach, but communication is vital. And so it's an ongoing, I wouldn't say daily necessarily, but as needed. And there's times throughout a transaction where once we get it under contract, and now we got to schedule the inspections and the appraisal, there's going to be more communication. But if we put your home on the market and there's no showings, no activity, I'll reach out to you probably once a week and just fill you in with how many views we've had online, kind of the back office things that they can't see. But regular communication, and this is true in any relationship, open communication is huge.
Right.
So let me just piggyback off of this just really quick, because I feel like I could add some value here too. One of the biggest challenges in our industry from construction is that communication with the client, right?
Yeah.
Majority, I would say a large majority of contractors don't do a good job of communicating with their clients. And then also too, just like how you asked that question, the consumer doesn't know to ask until later that particular question to contractors. So I would just put that out there to the consumer that they should be asking and drilling down about that communication question, because it is going to come up and it will affect the client experience.
Well, and I think especially when you're trying to, as contractors, trying to do more than one job, right? Because especially when I, as a consumer client, know that you're doing other jobs, it's like, hey, how much time are you spending there? How much time are you here on this job? Because I'm trying to get this done. And I think that's one, to your point, the communication, but also the accountability. Like, don't say you're going to have 3 guys here and then they don't show up. And then kind of like you didn't ask the question early enough, but it's like, hey, should I expect you here 5 days a week? Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you have other jobs where you're going to be on another job site 2 or 3 days? I know for me, it was kind of in the fall, but weather broke. And so during my addition, they're like, hey, we got to go do a couple roofs. And it's like, oh, so you're just going to stop my job to, slip in a few quick jobs, so you, and again, if I would have known that at the start, like, hey, if we get a break in weather, we might have to run over and do a couple jobs. It's really more about the communication than it is about, how you conduct business. And so I think setting up expectations, that's a great point, Sam. And again, I think the contractor can't be frustrated with clients when they want communication. And again,
correct.
My wife is awesome, but she will, like, she'll be on it. She's a C personality. She's an accountant. She wants to know the numbers, give me the estimates. Why did it go over? All of this. Whereas I'm like, hey, it's cool. We're good. No worries. You know, I'm just easygoing, and easygoing doesn't get jobs done the right way or under budget. So you sometimes need that good cop, bad cop, but the contractor needs, and to your point earlier, they're good laborers a lot of time. They don't run businesses. They don't have the sales or the marketing. And then they don't have the executive functions of a business owner to say, hey, I don't want to fight this fight because I'm going to lose this job and all the ones they might refer to me. So I got to give and take a little bit. Most contractors are just black and white. Here it is. If not, I'll just leave the job site with you wide open and undone. And like you had to do in that first job, get to the third contractor to finally get it over the finish line. And those are pain points that you try to convey so that other people avoid those hurdles. And inevitably, and I think that's to your point in contracting, the rules are always changing and there's going to be another challenge around the corner. So just don't ever get comfortable, right? Stay on your toes. Keep your head on a swivel. Yeah. You know, keep your head on a swivel for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Sam, you got a question from Panama City. And Laban kind of got the same question just out of Erie about, I guess, marketing strategy. How do you market the property to attract potential buyers? Because every property is different. Everyone markets different. Do you have a specific strategy that you use to market properties?
I mean, the first, I would say the first level of marketing is having a clean finish. The house needs to be 100% done, and that's some of the best marketing that you could have, right? So I would say holding yourself. Here's what I tell clients, right? My accountability first starts with my relationship with God, and then it comes out, to the people around me, right? So because that is the way that I have things structured, I hold myself to a high regard when it comes to finishing a home. So my guys know that too, and they understand that the level of finishing that's required to get a house done to look like a custom home. So I would say it first starts there, and then it really kind of goes to the neighbors, right? They've been kind of watching you. Watching you build this house. They're talking good about you or talking bad about you.
Well, but hey,
neighbors can have that much of an impact?
Well, but you also want that. Because we see this in open houses. They think, I'm just going to get nosy neighbors. It's like they might have a friend that they want in the neighborhood. They are the best prospect to find you a buyer. They definitely don't want somebody that doesn't fit their vibe. So if you can lean on them and get them to say, hey, listen, and that's where I do this with tenants sometimes, where you incentivize them with some money to say, and again, this is within, if they're a licensed agent, go through that whole disclosure. But even if it's gift card or something like that, where to help get it over that finish line, the cooperation needed, and you can do open houses with giveaways. And so the neighbors that come in, instead of poo-pooing and not wanting the nosy neighbor, embrace the neighbors, or do an open house for the neighbors, exclusively, and say, hey, if you have a referral for me, I can, throw another neighborhood party on the 4th of July or something. Incentivize people to get them to do the things you want them to do, and lean on that. You're right. Marketing is such a huge factor. And again, when you're marketing just a home for resale, it's a little different, because the other thing I think, we a lot of times are marketing for either new sellers or new buyers or new investors, not just specific homes. Because again, when you have an investor who buys multiple homes in a year, you might be showing them a number of homes, but I'm marketing to them very differently than I'm marketing a home for a specific seller. And I think that's where, honestly, and Sam, you can attest to it, because I think you have another podcast that you're on as well, is creating that engagement. And we talked about, Steve, on that drive home, part of what I want to do is when we get these questions, do a quick clip and then email it to those people, so that it's all about data, getting them in your database, staying in touch, then doing drip campaigns with emails and all those old traditional marketing things. But the point is making points of contacts, getting them and letting them feel like they're a part of what you're trying to grow and do.
Right. And Sam, I just wanted to give you the floor because you had two big projects that you were planning to start in 2025. And one was kind of like consulting because you've been through all the different aspects of real estate and kind of consulting and working with investors on the different steps that it takes to buy or sell or build a house. Is that kind of what you were planning on doing with that podcast?
So the podcast is kind of like how Laban mentioned. It's to create my own ecosystem, right? But part of it is to get the stories of different entrepreneurs, which it will naturally drag in views from their ecosystem, right? So they're able to tell their stories. I'm able to share, clips, for them, but then that's kind of naturally allowing me to talk about my passion in foster care, right? So there's a little bit of but then there's a big element too of just sharing a lot of knowledge inside of the space too. So that's two parts. That's just the podcast, right? But when it comes to the consulting, there's conferences. There's Facebook communities, there's live events, there's happy hours, so we're making not just online community, but we're
being visible,
being very visible, very, very active. So both of them are kind of running along each other, right? So the Pro Design Builder is specific to investors that want to learn how to build spec homes and duplexes and stuff like that. The other one that we have is the Nest Collab, which it's almost like an octopus, right? So we have a professional that does creative finance and has mezzanine funding with IRAs to fund deals, right? So that's one lane. There's me with consulting with building projects, and then there's somebody else that does short sales and loan modifications. So there's essentially a couple different lanes. If you were a real estate investor, if you wanted to come in, you could go down a certain track and learn creative finance, or you could go down a certain track and learn flipping and developing and stuff like that. So we're just trying to really create our own ecosystem when it comes to real estate investing.
So are you So, and as an incubator, are you saying that your creative financing and private lending is available to your clients if they find a deal that's incentivizing, that's something that you would be able to put together the financing side of that?
Correct. We would joint venture with them to package up their deal, right? So in my space, I can't do that as easy, but the biggest challenge in my particular space comes down to experience. Right.
Yeah. Right. Because you're newer at this.
And when it comes to funding and construction loans and stuff like that, because they don't want to lend to you if you don't have experience. So, one of the thoughts there to solve that particular issue is packaging it up where we do a little syndication and just a handful of people. They all get their experience and then they go on their merry way to build their own projects.
Is that kind of what we were trying to do with like the Husky group? Everyone was trying to learn real estate and then go off and do it themselves.
Correct. Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes complete sense then, because that's why you were all working in Connecticut.
Well, and it's interesting, Sam, because what did you say? You said
the Husky investment.
Well, but there was a collab because my wife.
Oh, the collab. Collab.
Yeah. So my wife's franchise is Collab Lending. She and her business partner, who lives in Puerto Rico, and so they are out selling the franchise, which is tied into tied into real estate brokerages, but trying to offer brokers who don't have financing or title in there to start packaging these franchises, because to your point, you have a playbook. So my wife had a playbook with how to train loan officers, to the point where she's like, wait a second, I basically built a franchise through an educational program that I can now passive income sell instead of standing there and teaching them how to do it.
Exactly.
Here's the program. And to Sam, your point, systems are key to growing. I mean, and this is a fun thing to look up, fractals, right? It's like a math equation that looks the exact same as you drill down through. And so I've said, when you look at a real estate umbrella of companies, each of these companies can look and function the same systematically, but be independent of the others while feeding those ancillary businesses. But if you don't have a system in place, and then the right people, of course,
correct.
You know, and Marcus Lemonis is all about the 3 Ps: people, process, and product. And product or service. But I mean, it's those things that are just vital, that 3-legged stool, just like the contractor who needs the sales side and needs the executive, along with the labor. If you don't realize you're missing some of those, you start, going a little wobbly. And so it's important to keep those lines of communication open. But what you're about to do is going to really set some, what I would think are younger, and it doesn't have to be younger people, just people. There's so many people that are transitioning in professions. And I feel like in the last few years, people have all got their license because it's so easy to sell a home. Well, yeah, it is. When you have, the supply and demand is upside down, it is easy to sell. But now, as it's becoming a more stable market, now you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to negotiate and talk to your clients versus just put a sign up and it's sold. And so I think it's going to create more opportunities for people, similar to what my wife's pursuing, what you're doing, because people are like, hey, I've worked for the man for too long. It's time for me to create my own story. And so that's awesome, Sam. Good on you. And best of luck with everything. And this is awesome, man.
Yeah, and it creates. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I have to mention our sponsors again. Pete Finch and the Finch Law Firm. If you have suffered any type of personal injury, a slip and fall, if a beam fell on you in a construction site, if your mother-in-law tried to run you over with your car, the Finch Law Firm is for you. They're based out of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Pete has fought legal battles all over the state. If you're ever in a pinch, call Finch. Dynamic Human Performance is owned and operated by Andre Dixon, former UConn legendary running back. He has a 5,000 square foot facility, high-tech training. He works with boys and girls, middle school and up, doesn't matter the sport. He sent boys and girls to Division I schools on scholarships. If you want to reach your potential, they are in Hartford. Dynamic Human Performance is for you. And then finally, Julius Trenches Williams. Julius has the Trench Mob, which works specifically with offensive and defensive linemen. His first camp is in February in Miami. And if you want to become a great pass rusher, if you want to become a great pass blocker, he has one of the best teams around, the greatest coaching staff. You will get looked at and evaluated and recruited. So it's very important to attend his camps, and it will absolutely pay off. He also offers personal training and classes in Decatur, Georgia, where he's based out of. So Julius Trenches Williams is one of our sponsors. But I have to say, this has been a phenomenal episode. Hearing
Sam,
it's easy. It's easy.
Well, no, I was telling Sam about the podcast world, because he's gonna be starting his podcast, and his numbers last week were phenomenal.
That's outstanding.
I think we did 3 or 4 different viewings. I think it's on YouTube. I mean, he's getting thousands upon thousands of viewers, and it just keeps going up. It did well on Instagram. It did well on LinkedIn. So,
and I think there it is. And for my business coach, it was after we did this, it was all about engagement. and working on engagement. And then authenticity is huge. I think, if we would have been at the game together, Sam, we'd have probably very many similar conversations, and I'd love to hear more. And this is where I appreciate Steve. Not only putting on what was the greatest pregame party Friday night before the bowl party, but honestly bringing so many guys together that we've all said that as former athletes, brothers, and teammates, they're the ones you can lean on. And so especially after athletics are over and now you're pursuing different dreams and pursuits, share that with the network of brotherhood and see how we can connect with each other and help each other out, even if it's just information and knowledge. It doesn't have to be referrals where money's being, it's just let's get these minds together, especially from the different generations. Like you're Aeropostale and I'm Russell. Like we got to bring in some of the Nike on too. Nike. Newsy was probably young enough to be Nike, though, wasn't he? He gets some of that Nike.
He might have ended. He might have ended with Nike. They ended with
Nike. He was with me, and then he ended with Nike when they won the bowl game. But because so many guys are getting into real estate now. Chris Bellamy was one of them. Well, Fincher, Mo Lloyd, all those guys. Razul is doing great.
But it's not a fad. I mean, like everybody invests in a 401k and doesn't think twice. But when they think about everybody should have a piece of real estate or two in their portfolio. And then we can get into that another time where you start talking about cash flowing assets. And again, I don't care if that's laundry machines, things that, and books. Books are another passive income where you write the book and then you sell it over and over, and the work has already been done.
There's a book coming for sure.
There you go. Good stuff.
For sure.
That's awesome.
I credit Sam so much because he has, as he's called it, pivoted careers many times because which is very, very smart because he always saw that there was something better out there, and he never wanted to settle for anything less than what he was capable of achieving. I think what he's doing now is going to take him places that are going to be spectacular because he has so much to offer, and he's already doing it. And like I said, he's fantastic on a podcast, and I'm glad that that's the route he's going to go. I think that he's going to develop a big listenership, but this is how we kind of do Broker Than You. Laban takes a lot of questions. And
sounds good. I like the questions. Send more questions.
Yeah, they're great questions.
Sure. Great questions.
I got like a quarter of them. I mean,
and that's so much. My resolution for 2025 is not only getting the questions answered, but being able to open them that communication for those listeners who submitted questions. Like, hey, shoot me an email anytime and I'll answer it. It doesn't have to be on the podcast. But those are the things that people want to know. And in today's day and age, it is a technological world, and why hide that light? You know what I mean? Let that little light shine, Sam. I love it, brother.
No, you're right.
I agree.
That's our whole goal. We're gonna increase alumni engagement throughout UConn, so everyone works together.
Let Phil Hunt know we're bringing him. We're bringing the band back.
I will let Phil. I told Phil that. I said, Phil, guess what? We're doing another party in Boston, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that was great. That really was so much fun. And listen, Steve, I can't tell you, my daughter, when she found out about that Dixie D'Amelio, she's like, Dad, are you serious? Why didn't you get a pic? I'm like, what?
I got a picture with the guy.
Yeah, Mark, listen, but Mark, he's the type of guy that, you know what I mean? You want to be able to reach out to and just imagine that advice he can give, right? The knowledge that he has. Man, left and right.
I'm hoping to get him on. I'm hoping to get him on the show.
You got to get, I was thinking about this too, real quick. Bleedy Ray Wilson, because I'm wearing a Notre Dame shirt. What? Bleedy Ray Wilson played at UConn, right? And then he played for the Falcons, played for the Titans. He got drafted by the Titans, but he locked down Golden Tate. He actually filled in when Jasper was killed.
He was 09.
So Bleedy Ray Wilson is from General McLean, Edinburgh, PA, right around the corner here. But I'd love to hear his story because I still follow him on Instagram and stuff, but he's living a life.
I'll ask Andre Dixon for sure. Andre will have that info.
Yeah.
But Sam.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you, Sam.
For having
thank
me.
you, brother.
No, it's been good.
Sam is also very spiritual.
I'll be on. We'll get on here.
Sam is very spiritual as well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And he actually helped me very much with some spiritual guidance. It was very much needed, which was very appreciated.
Prayer is powerful, bro.
And Sam is going to have a phenomenal 2025. I love everything that he's doing.
Absolutely.
And again, we appreciate you joining us. And Laban, thanks for driving me to Boston. It was a fun trip.
Happy to do it, man. That was awesome.
We had a ball. Your friend slept in the car for 2 hours, just disappeared. That was great. I loved it. He just had enough. He's like, I'm going to lay down.
Toast.
But again, this has been Broker Than You with our guest, Sam Dorville, who has a big 2025 ahead of him down in Florida. You can get in touch with him on his Instagram, The Pro Design Builder. Go to his Instagram, and that's how you can contact him. And he will also be launching a podcast as well to educate you on all the different lanes that you need to be in and to learn if you want to get into real estate. And then the charismatic enigma himself, Laban Marsh. That's all I have to say there. The king of real estate in Erie. Marsh Real Estate. We love Marsh. Marsh.
Let's get back on track for 2025.
Yes,
for sure.
We will.
I'm excited.
The market's going to get back on track. So for both of you schmucks, remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges,